Excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural edition of the Return to Workforce Task Force webinar series. This is the first of our webinars that we will hold every Tuesday at 2 o'clock now through Labor Day. So please check out our landing page and all of the topics and the speakers that are planned. And if you have any specific topic you'd like to see, please let us know. My name is Jeanette Winters, and I am the chair of the task force, and it is absolutely my delight to introduce to you today Marcus Dillon. Marcus is a local CPA and individual who helps organizations with their cash flow and profitability by streamlining all sorts of things related to people and process. So we are delighted to have Marcus, and we also have his companion and better half, Rachel, on the line with us, who has been pivotal in getting this, this program put together. We will be looking for your questions in the Q&A or the chat, so please feel free to jump in at any time. Marcus, we'll turn this over to you. We're delighted to have you. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeanette, and excited for this. I know that I've prepared. Rachel has helped me prepare. I do not think Rachel is ready to go on screen today, but we'll get through it just fine without her. So thanks for that warm introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share the presentation, my screen, and if y'all will just confirm that everything is good there.
We gotcha.
Awesome. Well, yeah, it's my pleasure today. Thanks so much for tapping me to kind of be as a part of the task force and really help think through and prepare for the return to work as far as the Katy area is concerned. Really excited to what is on the other side of this curve for most businesses, the community as a whole. And we feel that, you know, we're really passionate about businesses and small business owners. And any way that we can help educate and just elevate business owners and their teams, we're happy to join alongside. So this is our pleasure to be involved. So really what we want to cover today within this presentation, and let me kind of get it started. The learning objectives today are really talking about creating a plan, an action plan as we ramp up revenue, kind of get back to business, what we're helping folks really consider before they just jump right back into it. And some folks already might be back or at a limited percentage. And so everything that we'll cover here today, hopefully someone just takes away a small bit and maybe can incorporate it into their team or their business. But we're talking about ramping up revenue, after you ramp up revenue, look at sales. How do we remain profitable throughout the curve, on the other side of this curve? And then the whole time creating a great culture, retaining the culture that you had was great. If it wasn't, just what some steps that you can implement throughout this, and on the other side, retaining a great culture within our business. So the point of all is just to exceed customer expectations and create a legacy. Why we went back to the business and really from there. So we'll kick it off here. The first thing is whenever you're coming out of this, and we like to call it this forced change. So whether it was you were mandated closed or operating on only a certain percentage, it was a forced change that we're all having to respond to within our lives, within our businesses. And the first thing you need to do as you have the opportunity to come back and scale back up to full capacity is develop an action plan. And we've seen with many business owners, with many organizational leaders, after you've spent some time in developing the action plan that works for you and your team, following that plan and implementing on that plan is going to be much less stressful than second guessing yourself throughout the way. So the first thing that we're having folks really invest in whenever they're developing that plan is reflecting on the past and looking at where were you at pre-COVID? Where were you at, you know, that February, maybe early March timeframe? How was your business? And so with with the return to work, with the return outside of this curve, do you want to go back to the way it was? And really the questions that we'd like to ask there is, were you profitable? Was your organization healthy? Profitable, if you were healthy, why would you want to go back pre-COVID? So what are some changes that we can implement now to make your business that much stronger on the other side of this? I think the amazing thing is you account what opportunities you have here. It's like starting with a blank white paper. If you look there, so however you've done business up until that point doesn't mean that's how you have to do business on the other side of this. So reflect on where you were, identify your pain points and weaknesses you had within your organization. Maybe it was around how you got paid. Maybe it was the way you provided services. If anything, during this time has given us an opportunity to say, what if? What is possible? How could we take this as an experiment and go from there? Like, I know for me and my business, I would have never said, hey, we've got a big tax deadline coming up mid-March. It would be fun if we just close the doors, send everybody home to work from home just for the heck of it. Let's see how it goes. But honestly, that's what we had to do. And on top of that, we're lucky enough to employ a lot of working parents and add on the complexity of, hey, schools are no longer open. You don't have really daycare or childcare facilities. So let's add that onto your plate as well. So I think all of this creates an opportunity. And if you look at it from a positive lens, you can really start asking yourself, what was it that we're able to do on the other side? So another thing, as you're developing your action plan, dig deep. Go back to the days whenever you started this organization, when you started your business, and ask yourself, why did you take that step out? Why did you go into business, or why did you become that organizational leader? And were you fulfilling those promises to your previous self? If you were not, if there's some small changes that we can make throughout this and on the other side, let's go ahead and do that. Let's make your life back to where you thought you were going to be. So all that to say, developing an action plan is really that first step. And by just jumping in and turning on the revenue machine and starting to sell products or go back to the way business was, we think if you just jump right in and do that, you may be selling yourself short in the long haul. So kind of moving ahead, after that action plan is developed, what we want to do is ramp up revenue. So many businesses were either mandated close or impacted by a percentage of only being allowed to open up to a certain percentage. So the first thing that you need to do whenever you're either ready to kind of come back to the office or even scale back up to full capacity is assess your demand or backlog. So I know for a lot of our medical professionals, people that we serve on that side in dentistry and medical offices, they were mandated closed, could maybe only see emergency cases. And for them, it's more of a scheduling item or issue, not really that their customers have gone away, but how do they address scheduling whenever they reopen? And there may be people in the construction industry or other industries that have to take that same thing into account. Maybe they were impacted only temporarily, but their customer base is still there and they're ready to come back. So that kind of, before you just jump right in and think that you have to recreate the wheel with new products or new services, assess your demand, assess your backlog. Maybe it's just a scheduling item. The other thing is, which of your products or core service offerings have been missed the most? So if you have a very dynamic menu of services, really go through that list of services and see which ones will create the biggest demand the soonest. And those are the ones that you should probably focus on. Hopefully those align with your most profitable services and product offerings. But ultimately, you want to make sure that you care for the people that have missed you the most. If you have service offerings and products that are outside of your core, you want to maybe delay rolling those out. So all of that to say, after a quick assessment, who are the ones that really need you. So focus on those opportunities and go from there. Wearing the creative hat has really been awesome to see. So as a business owner ourselves, and then working with so many business owners and organizational leaders, COVID and in this time has created some awesome stories, some awesome experiments. And that's what's really given us joy, given us hope for this other side of the curve. And one of those is we have a friend who owns a fast food restaurant here in Katy. And whenever they were mandated closed and really the cards were stacked against them with what does their core product offering look like? How is that going to impact their business, their team? She adapted really well and went out and got creative to where you could place orders online, and then she would go out to the neighborhoods where folks were being quarantined. So she assessed what her problem was, how she could solve it, and then what opportunities existed in that. So her story is amazing to share because during that she identified she was able to do pre-orders, go out to neighborhoods. She had to rent a refrigerated truck at $250 a day. But what that did is it actually increased her sales by $20,000 a week beyond what her normal revenue would have been just by having the store open. So over the last 8 weeks, she's added to her sales $20,000 in addition to the scaled back service or restaurant offerings that she has. And maybe on the other side of this, she keeps some of that in place. So that's what gives me hope that, as entrepreneurs, that we really think through what opportunities exist. Sharing her story is just one of the many ones we've heard over this time as far as people getting creative and just thriving throughout this. So I'm going to ask a quick question. We don't have polls built in today, but we've got some questions that maybe you can reflect on. And then if you want to share any follow-up questions you have toward the end or after this presentation, we'd be happy to talk through that with you. So that first question is, are your products and services different after COVID-19 curve, or should they be? So some of that today you can treat almost like a workshop and maybe take notes and follow along, but then also ask these really introspective questions to see how you should dig deep and what your products look like on the other side of this. What we're also seeing is whenever you have the built up or the demand, these new products and services, or your existing services and products that you haven't been able to produce, how do you shout that from the rooftops? And so the other thing that we've seen throughout this quarantine or COVID curve is more people posting to social media and more people doing things that are within their control. One thing that I would recommend to you, if you're offering a new product, new service line, make sure your customers know about it. Make sure that they are able to share in that offering with you. So social media is very low cost, low barrier. You have to put down your pretenses and just start. So if it's video, if it's webinar through education, I think a really great example of this at the local level, my wife and I have really grown to love Crown Kitchen over this time. So if you haven't followed Crown Kitchen in Old Katy or Katy proper, I'd recommend that you go do that. Go to his Facebook page. Their business model, you talk about an entrepreneur who's adapted. They closed their restaurant, and then they also created a family menu so he and his team can work and know exactly how much food. They did pre-orders, but then just his personality shines in those videos. So go to that Facebook page, Crown Kitchen. It's just a joy to see someone so excited about their business, helping their customers come back. And it also builds up demand for his current offering, but then whenever you're able to actually go back in that restaurant and order a big old slice of wedding cake, that's what I'm waiting for. So, but go check that out. That's a great example of someone that's really taken the resources that they have and built them up. So, one other thing that you can do just to highlight your customers and your team throughout this time, make sure that you're focusing on the positive. I think there's so much negativity out there right now, whether it's COVID or the response or just the world that we live in. So much of the media is focused on negativity that if you can highlight someone else's story and just create a positive aspect. We have a friend who she owns a marketing and media company, and meeting with her and talking through things, there's a very high percentage that if your emails or posts relate to some type of COVID response, that they will probably not get read. People are just kind of done with it, but you need to be the one that best lays out that vision for you as you come back. And part of that is going above and beyond just being a billboard, really helping educate and tell folks where you're at is really going to add to that relationship. So those are some things to think about whenever you're rolling out those new service product offerings, and then also maybe just announcing that you're coming back and you're excited to see the folks that you haven't been seeing the last few weeks. The last thing on the marketing piece is really celebrate everything you do. We know that social media and all of those various available avenues that are there for you aren't a lot of big budget items if you control that yourself. So it doesn't take much to go out and celebrate big milestones within your business, people's birthdays, the upcoming specials for the week, just the little stuff. I think that's going to create a bigger connection with your community and get you off to the right foot and create longer, deeper relationships with those that you care about. So as we ramp up revenue, I know as kind of the financial side, that the life of the business that I'm usually involved in is on the financial and how do we get paid. So a lot of tips that we're seeing here is if you prior to COVID were still accepting paper payments, cash, waiting on folks to write you checks and bring those in, this gives you a great opportunity to change how you are being paid going forward. So online payments are not really even a thing of the future. They're a thing of right now. So if you're not set up for online payments, electronic payments, really lean into that. If you've already accepted some, what does it look like to do that on the other side? Many retailers are not accepting cash anymore on the other side of this, just from the fear that something will be on that paper. Who knows? I think if you go through your sales process and make it easy for customers to pay you, then that's going to pay off very, very big in the end. The other thing to think about is if you provide any type of professional services or can be creative in how your business model is set up and employ a recurring revenue model. We've done that ourselves, and then we've done that with other clients. That annuity of the consistent, constant customer will pay off, and you can budget around it. You can invest in those relationships. So really evaluate when you can turn actually a customer into a client and care for that client long term. I think you hear the interchange of customer and client pretty often. Customer usually lends to someone that does a one-time transaction. Client is really someone that's in your care. So we would love for you to really use that in your business, really create clients out of customers and go from there. Recurring revenue model is a great way to do that. The second thing, or the third thing that we actually saw was whenever businesses were mandated to close or to stop operations, whether that was a percentage or fully, we saw business owners really wanting to continue to care for their clients, customers throughout that process. And we were really, really apprehensive to call those items discounts. So if you continue to provide services throughout this pandemic, and then on the other side, but you know that it's probably not in the best interest of your client or your customer to keep paying you at your full rate. Instead of discounting your services, what we would recommend there is doing a deferment. A deferment is you're keeping your fee, your pricing structure intact, but you're just spreading that out maybe over a longer term, to where if they've got a short-term cash flow need, you're able to help them kind of meet them where they're at, and then build that back up over time. And you haven't discounted any of the work that you've always done, any of the work that you're doing now, because honestly, you're probably invested in that customer. You're probably working twice as much. I know that that's how we felt during our initial response and just seeing clients through this time. So always factor in a deferment over a discount. And if you gave someone a 50% discount over 2 months, then you would just spread that 50% for those 2 months over the next 6 payments throughout to end out your year and your contract life. So that's really something beneficial that you can do, that you can keep servicing your customer and have a built-in customer over that recurring revenue model. The last thing that we'll kind of touch on here is if you do have new products and services that you're trying to introduce to the market, and you're really wanting to build momentum around those and get people excited, and you feel that the best way to build that momentum or excitement is to do that through a discount or not your typical fee structure, what we would recommend there is actually calling those incentives. And those incentives we would build around a timeline. So you don't want to discount yourself for any less value than you bring. So if you can build in incentives to build up that momentum and ramp up that revenue, but there's a timeline around that to where you're not offering those discounts, 12 months, 18 months into this, and people have kind of got back into the pricing structure that currently works for you or that has worked for you in the past. So I think incentives with the timeline are great, and actually holding people accountable to those timelines will actually help you build back your revenue long term. So those are just some quick initial thoughts as you do ramp up revenue, but then not ramp it up for the sake of your future self or your future business to be at such discounted rates. We're going to ask another question right here. So are your customers able to pay you electronically or contactless? What would it take to implement that? And so I think for a while after this, we're going to live in this contactless society as far as business owners and how we receive payments. So if you're not on a cloud-based solution where you're able to accept payment electronically, you need to look into that. We've seen a lot of folks kind of look to us to advise them on their tech stack and what it means to be truly virtual, truly in the cloud. If your business is using a server-based or a desktop-based program, really you're at the point where you have so many different options to really evaluate. And part of that is how you receive payment. So if you're a retail or restaurant business, how you receive payment, can you control it to where that card never comes out of that customer's hand? It never goes into your employee's hand, and they control everything. I know that various restaurants around the Katy area are implementing that, where they drop the machine or bring the machine to you. I think that's great. I think that's something that you could look into with your merchant card processor, and really implement what would it take to be that on the other side of this. So that kind of takes us from ramping up revenue, what we're going to be ready to kind of start back the best way possible. And then we're going to take a step into, now that we've ramped up revenue, how do we take that revenue and remain profitable? And maybe it's more revenue, like our friend who was able to kind of do an additional offering and have more revenue, but maybe it's you're just working with less. So in those scenarios, you're actually going to have to be a little bit more disciplined with your budget. And so with that, you actually have to look at your numbers. And as accountants, we love numbers, but we know that most business owners don't. They're a necessary evil. So I would spend some time with your accounting team or your bookkeeper, or your CPA, to really get a handle on where you're at today, and make sure that things are up to date, your accounts are reconciled, that you can precisely get your hands around your whole financial position. One other thing, after you kind of assess and know where you're at, is to look at your burn rate. So a burn rate is a fancy term. You may have heard it a lot during this season. And what that means is just how fast are you using cash. To create a burn rate analysis, you would just start with your existing cash. What does your scaled back expenses look like? How much are you spending per month? How much revenue is coming in? So the expenses take away from your existing cash, your revenue or potential revenue adds to it, and then you get down to your ending cash, and then you scale that out for a few months. So I'm sure the internet is your friend, and Google, you can find plenty of burn rate analysis. We have those resources as well if you'd like to reach out to us. But that's something that you really need to get your hands around, so you know how long can you last at a percentage discount as far as sales coming in. So cash flow projections are also going to be huge during that point. And really just saying, even if we increase sales, if we increase expenses at the same point, how much longer do we need to do this? And I think once you have your hands around, you can maybe not be so anxious about the future. I think developing that action plan, looking at the financials, and just working that plan, getting up every day and hitting the ground running. If you have sales numbers that you've got to hit, just like an elephant, just one bite at a time. So I think that's what you need to focus on as far as whenever you're looking at the financials. The other thing that's really big, and what we're seeing with so many organizational leaders, is surround yourself by just people who care. So I realize that in my position with clients, that I have intimate knowledge into their financial picture. And whenever a business owner is coming off of a huge win, a celebration where they just knocked it out of the park, I know that if I don't tell that person congratulations, that probably nobody will. And so I actually go out of my way to make sure that clients are celebrating those big wins, and in that we know what they went through to achieve those wins. Mm-hmm. And then it's the same thing on the flip side. If they're walking through some struggles, we are right there alongside them to kind of make sure that they navigate those struggles just fine and come out on the other side of it. So if you don't have somebody like us, I would recommend surrounding yourself with a good team. And maybe it's not a financial coach or a financial professional, but maybe it's just some type of coach or somebody that you can actually talk to that's been where you have before. I think that's really important, is that they've got the background that you need to walk through that season of life, and that they've just got the education and have seen some of the same exact things that maybe you're experiencing in your business. So we know that it's lonely at the top, and so a lot of organizational leaders feel that they cannot go to the team directly because a lot of those decisions may impact the team. They feel that they can't go to the spouse because, I think Rachel's muted, but we probably talk way too much about the business, and they're probably going to have a certain angle. So I think building a team of independent third party that can just pour into you and lift you up will definitely help you throughout this season. So the last thing that we're kind of look at in the remaining profit goal is your team. Your staff is usually the biggest expense that is incurred in your business. And because we work with a lot of professional service providers, we know that's the case. So once you've developed that action plan, once you've kind of assessed as you ramp up revenue, really look at which staff are needed and where they're needed. So like I said, this has been a great experiment for us. We've been able to leapfrog years as far as where we want to be working remotely. We've accelerated that time frame. And so I think on the other side of this, a lot of folks are going to be really evaluating their real estate. And it pains me to say that I think our landlord is actually the most highest paid individual on our payroll if you take into account rent. So luckily for us, we are the landlord as well, but that's another scenario. Actually, the bank is the landlord in our situation, but that's a discussion for another day. But I think if you look at your needs as far as staffing is concerned, where are those folks needed? Are they effective where they're working remotely? And do they feel safe? Do they feel like they're being cared for where they're currently working? And if that's the case, if they're being effective, just let them be. Let them be productive. Let them feel safe, and go from there. If you need to bring folks back in office or back into location, I think that needs to be discussed and actually lay out a plan to know what that looks like. Jeanette and her team, we've actually come up with a guideline. If you want to go to the Katy Chamber website, I think that's the easiest way to get to it. And the COVID-19 response, there is a list of 15 kind of principles that you can follow to be a safe work and reopen business. And that way you just don't have to feel like you have to reinvent the wheel if you do have a physical presence. And if you are looking for some guidance, the chambers that are represented with this group have put together that list, so you don't have to. So take us up on that resource. But really, once you've determined which staff are needed, how are we going to pay them? Maybe they aren't brought back at full payroll just because you don't need them. What we would recommend there is don't reduce their hourly rate. Don't reduce or maybe convert their salary from salary to hourly and really pay them on an hourly basis as needed. So that helps keep people motivated. If you told your team that, hey, we're going to cut your hourly rate or your salary rate, but expect the same amount of output, that's probably not going to keep them motivated and not going to keep them happy on the other side of this. And what we're seeing is that pre-COVID and then even throughout this time, there is definitely a war on talent. Good team members are hard to find or work hard to find. And we think that the way that some employers are responding during this time may actually give opportunities to the folks who are really treating their team with care. So you don't want to do anything to jeopardize that relationship that you've got with your team members. So if you do need to scale back payroll just because sales aren't there and you are being a responsible business owner, don't decrease the hourly rate, decrease the time. And then really, as you ramp back up, you may have some folks that were furloughed or on unemployment. Make sure that you're bringing them back as needed. Don't feel like you're pressured into bringing folks back too soon. And we know that there are SBA programs with the PPP and the EIDL that you may feel obligated to bring folks back sooner than really needed. We would really recommend not making the government a partner in your business. We would recommend that you do what's the most responsible choice for you and your business. And then if a PPP loan, if a percentage of it is not forgiven at the end of the day, then pay that back or turn it into a loan. So we've done plenty of webinars over that program, and I hope one day that I never have to see those three letters together again. But that's a conversation for another day. So like we mentioned earlier, we think that as you assess ramping up revenue, remaining profitable, that if there's an opportunity to add talent, to add that position that you've wanted for the last few years or months and really can take your organization to that next level on the other side of this curve, this may be a great opportunity to do that. So if that is the case, determine what that budget is for that person and how much you're willing to commit to that. And I think having a great conversation with a potential new hire, like we said earlier, talent is still going to be very scarce as far as really good talent. So bring back your rock stars first. If you're able to bring on new talent, able to secure someone that's just a new rock star, do that as well. The last thing as far as staffing is concerned, make sure that you've been very, very documented on onboarding and educating your staff about the new procedures. You can use the template that we've set up for you to do that with the resources that Jeanette can maybe talk into a little bit here later. But make sure that you've developed your plan and gone over that with your team in advance. That way there's not an unreasonable expectation whenever they have an interaction with a client or customer. You want everybody on the same page. You want to make sure that that is documented, and that if they feel that something is outside of the scope of that piece of reopening, that they know who to turn to and how to get their questions answered. So kind of talking about staffing, this is just one of those questions that maybe you can reflect on. So how have your staffing needs changed after the COVID-19 curve? And I think maybe you were unfortunate enough to have to be closed, and then on the other side of this, you've got some opportunities. But really think about today, if we're thinking about this webinar as a workshop, where do we go from here? What does the next 6, 12, 18 months look like? And what is your staffing needs around those timeframes? Kind of the last thing we'll cover here today is just culture. And so culture throughout this process, as far as your team is concerned and your clients are concerned, is going to be critical to the long-term success of your business. You may have heard it said, every organization has a culture. You might as well make it a good one. I think that if you actually put in some time and do some work on your culture and create and cultivate a really good team internally, care of your team, ultimately they'll take care of your customers and your clients. And the best way that you can do that right now is just asking questions. Your communication level with your team should feel too much right now, especially if you're spread out, if you're virtual. It should feel that you are talking to them way more often than even when you're in office. And the reason why is there's just a lot going on in the world today. So you want to check the pulse of your team. You want to care for them and make sure that they're healthy. And if there's an issue, that you want to address it first before it addresses itself and impacts the business. The way that we've seen most clients do that, most businesses do that, is by doing their daily stands, where you just get the whole team together through Zoom or Microsoft Teams for 15 minutes a day. And we actually have a client who does a show and tell one day a week. And that's pretty, I mean, you're throwing it back to like first grade there. So you can make these fun. You want to embrace the culture that maybe you've already got, or improve it if you can. So the other resource that we've seen used, and we've actually incorporated this into our week, is the weekly tool. And so this is just a resource that we had access to, and it's an email that can be sent out to our whole team internally. And it just asks 3 simple questions. It asks questions about their stress level, about their workload, and about just their overall week. And we can easily see whether there's something that we need to address, that we need to speak into. And maybe it's, for us, maybe they've got a lot of projects closing out that week. And that helps us to know, because those client-facing team members of ours, we want to make sure that they're healthy and that they're cared for, because everybody's balancing a lot of stuff right now. So the best way as organizational leaders that we can do that is addressing the elephants in the room. You definitely want to talk about the things that maybe you wouldn't have before. So if there are going to be changes that come along, maybe there is going to be additional furloughs or additional layoffs, you need to be very direct about that and let folks know what the plan is. And before you do that, actually having your plan in place and not making off-the-cuff comments or really being flexible or not clear. I think you do want to address just the evident, and that way people can plan for it and get some things together or respond appropriately. The other thing is, do you have some things in your business around your staff that have been untouchable up to this point? And so that's the shooting the sacred cows. A lot of business leaders and podcast guys love that term, but is there something that up until this point that's been protected in your organization? And is it time to look at that and see, is that still the right way to do business? And we've said it before, the real estate piece, a lot of folks are going to evaluate what their physical presence looks like on the other side of this. What is your plan for what your team looks like? Is there an opportunity to outsource a piece of it? And that makes good long-term sense for the business and for you as the owner. So I think some of those items, if it's a pain point, if it's something that in the back of your mind you've been putting off for years or for months, you probably owe it to yourself to address it and have that conversation with yourself or with your team to really move forward and move forward without that baggage. And then the last thing, as far as team is concerned, is just appreciation. Like we said, a lot of folks are going through a lot of different things. So I know if your team's anything like mine, they're dealing with kids at home. Summer camps may be coming back online, but not to the fullest extent that they thought. They were probably looking forward to a vacation of some sort that got canceled. What does that look like? I think if you show appreciation for your team and really take care and lift them up during this time, that's gonna speak volumes to you as an organization, speak volumes to you as a leader, and that's gonna pay off in the end as far as how they treat you and your customers on the other side of this. The last piece of culture deals with externally, with you and your customers. So throughout this point, like we focused on with our team, you need to do the same exact thing for your customers. And so we know that in society today, that there's this underlying fear that exists. And you have customers, you have team members that are on both sides of the spectrum. You may have one customer who plans to come into the office and is not going to wear a mask, not going to wear gloves, not going to wash his hands, but that guy is in your care. And then you're going to have another guy who is going to come in office, hazmat suit down to the T, and constantly using alcohol to wash his gloves. But he's only leaving the house because of that medical emergency to come see you, or whatever the emergency dictates that he actually left the house. So you've got two ends of the spectrum that are in your care, and you better aim for the middle. So no matter where you're at on that spectrum, you have to care for both sides. So maybe it's implementing those policies that we've lined out through the task force to say, this is the community facing document. This is our promise to you how we're going to keep you safe during this time. And that's great to communicate before you have that interaction with your customers, so they can make that choice of how they want to interact with you during this time. And so just know that aiming for the middle is what we're recommending, what we're seeing most businesses will be set up for success. You're probably going to have opinions either way, but just know that the strongest, most vocal opinions are not the majority of your customer base. So I think that's what you consider whenever you're rolling out your plan to come back in office, or whatever that looks like to fully ramp back up. The other item to kind of consider is your 80-20 rule, knowing that 20% of your best relationships are the ones that keep you in business. And if you're going to focus on anybody during this time, as far as externally and building that culture, it needs to be that 20%. So just like you've been in constant communication with your team members, hopefully you're in constant communication with your best clients. So reach out to them, see what's going on in their life. Maybe there's an opportunity there, like we kind of talked about, to highlight them and what their business is going through, like wins or how you can help them out. And then maybe they're your sounding board for some of these products and services that you're rolling out. I know that we've done that here recently, the last few weeks, as we've tapped our best clients, and we have a vision of the future, and we've got some products that help us to get that future fully realized. And what I've done up until this point is tap my best clients who they would follow us anywhere. And so I think that's the main thing, is kind of getting that momentum, feeling them out about, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. What do you think? And then the second question might be, what would you pay for that? What's the value there? And what can I ask as far as the price? So your best customers are going to be the ones that want to see you succeed. And so that's where you should invest some time into those relationships. And then that last thing is really setting the expectation for all customers, whether it's coming in office, whether it's coming into your location, or just how they interact with you. I think if you set an expectation and over deliver, exceed expectations, that's going to be much easier to deal with than having them come into your business and having the expectation be that it was pre-COVID. I know that, frequenting restaurants again, it's just different. And I think a lot of grace is required right now. And hopefully you can have those communications with your clients to at least say, hey, be with us during this time. We would love to serve you like we always have, but things will look a little bit different. So I think as you invest in these relationships, it's going to lead to a much healthier, much more valuable business in the long term. And really the sky is the limit. I think we've been given a great opportunity with this COVID. And how do you build upon the positive? How do you embrace what's going well and change what wasn't going well? So kind of looking at the questions that we've asked today, aim for better, not back to normal. And so I think really reflect on what were those pain points? What did I set out for my life to look like when I started this business? And these questions, these questions will help you kind of frame that narrative and maybe help you develop that action plan. So that first one being the products and services, what looks different? That's that second one, how are we able to get paid on those products? Third, what does staffing look like? And then that last one, which relationships do you need to invest in? And so that's kind of where we really have talked about today. Develop the action plan so we ramp up revenue, remain profitable, and then create great culture along the way. And that's going to set your business up not only to come out of this curve as a really healthy business, but just come out of the curve at lightning speed and go from here. And if you've got any questions about today or any follow-up, Dillon CPAs, we are a local business support organization. We are a team of CPAs and accounting professionals, so don't hold that against us. The best email for us to share in any resources that we've kind of mentioned today is that coach@dilloncpas.com. Our website is constantly being updated with any new SBA or tax law changes, and we've actually created a landing page due to COVID-19. So if you really want to geek out on PPP and EIDL and tax law changes, that's there for you as well. If not, we're here too. So if you've got any questions today or any follow-up, we would love to be a resource for you and sharing that, because we feel that that's how we're called in the community. And with that, I'm going to kind of open it back up to Jeanette to see, is there any questions? Are there anything that we really need to share today that before we wrap this up?
So Marcus, one question that came in was about budget discipline. And the listener is asking, how conservative or optimistic should I be about revenue? It's really hard to know. How would you respond to that, listener?
So, I feel that it's my place with our clients to set the expectation for the worst possible scenario. So if you've got some income booked, then, and you know that the cash flow position of your customers is solid. I think the Houston area is also dealing with an oil and gas underlying issue right now as well. So I think knowing your customer, having communication with them to make sure that they can follow up on that sales, where we're at today, you can build upon the history that you've built over the last few years, but we are in such a different economy, both at a worldwide level and then also locally, with the amount of unemployment, the amount of uncertainty in the oil and gas market, that I think doing your projection and planning on the worst case scenario is really what I would recommend. If you've got some revenue booked, if you're able to control cash flow through ACH and credit card payments, that's what I would recommend, and that's what I would bank on. But other than that, I'm not really factoring that in until it hits my cash account.
Okay, good deal. So continuing down that vein, any strategies on reducing merchant fees with the processing of payments?
Yeah, it goes back to communication. So if you haven't reached out and renegotiated that fee in the last 6 to 12 months, I think you're due for it. You may have beaten up that processor along the way to where there's just not much room. I think that's something you can evaluate. You can also evaluate any other fixed fee engagements that you've got. And it's maybe not even beating them up on price. It may be asking for a deferment. Have you gone to your bank to really evaluate bank charges as a whole? Or have you put any large loans on deferment? What options do you have? And that's what we really worked through with our clients when all this stuff really started to happen. Because you want to make sure, as much as you want your customers to stay in business, you also want your vendors to stay in business. So you don't want to turn the screws on so tight that you have to build a whole new team, and that includes your vendors on the other side of this. So I think caring for both sides is really important right now.
Boy, that's really a great response. So on a personal level, where do you turn? What resources do you recommend to stay current with both local and state activities, whatever they might be?
Yeah, I think the organizations that we represent here today are really good. They have their pulse on the local community. So whether it's your chamber or economic development, how you're receiving your news is critical during this time. And so I think you can rely on the folks that you trust. What we've seen is going straight to the source. For us, because we're looking at bigger tax law and SBA and things like that. So we're not hanging out in Facebook groups and trying to get people's opinions. We're actually going to the source, going to the actual IRS, the SBA, to kind of get, or our consulting groups who we've paid for that knowledge. And that's who we're relying on. So I think it's a mix of both. It's your local people that have a pulse on the local economy, but then if you've got some big items that you're dealing with, going straight to the source.
Good deal. So something you've learned or have enjoyed over the past 10 weeks?
So one question, and I didn't share this, but one question that we've asked our team, or planning to ask our team and really digging into whenever we have our firm retreat later this summer to kind of kick things back off, is what have you loved about COVID life? And so I think if you ask your team that, maybe it's that they've spent more time with their children, maybe it's that they've enjoyed these walks. And would they be a better team member on the other side of this if you could incorporate that into their day or their life? And so I think it's just by asking simple questions, it's addressing the elephants in the room. And that's one piece that Rachel and I are actually, it is written down in stone. It was probably written in that PowerPoint notes, but I probably skip right over it. But what do you love about COVID life?
Mm-hmm. So what do you and Rachel love about COVID life?
So, and I don't know how, we've got 2 young daughters. So one turned 15 during COVID. And so we're actually, as scary as it is, doing the driving thing. And thankfully there's not as many people on the roads right now. So we're teaching a 15-year-old to drive, and then we've got a while they're still under our roof, we're going to make the most of it, even if it's in the middle of a pandemic. And I think there's been a lot of games, a lot of cards being played that really would not have been the case if it was just life as normal.
Oh, that is so great to hear. That's so great to hear. Well, while others may be offering their questions, you mentioned the resources that are available at the task force landing page, and that's the Return to Work Task Force. And the task force is made up of members of the business community, various chambers throughout the area, business people themselves, area economic development group, and then we have the medical community represented as well. So both a large hospital system and local free clinic. So the core group has aligned with the Greater Houston Partnership on returning to work safely. And so we urge all of those who are in attendance today to please check out the pledge We're asking everybody to be conscious and cautious about returning to work so that we abate the curve and that we avoid the second spin if we can. And so we're asking people to take the pledge and posting the pledge logo on your business location. And so, Marcus, have you taken the pledge?
I'm one of, or as of yesterday, I'm one of 29 companies that's out there. So I will say that I felt responsible, not only as a business owner in KD to go out and do that, but because I was presenting here today that I thought I better go do that. But the resources there are excellent. For us, we're not having to reinvent the wheel with the different policies and procedures and what to follow. I think as far as guidelines, they're just really helpful. I think Matthew and the different chambers are also going to highlight some of those businesses on the other side of this and visit them, I think is the case.
Yep, that is the case.
But yeah, it could serve in a couple different manners just to show, hey, this is how we work through it. And, you know, just if we're able to share with what we're doing and it helps somebody else not reinvent the wheel or spin their wheels, we're more than happy to do that. So really thankful for those resources that are out there, and they were a huge help to us. And yeah, I got my name on the website. So
good deal. Good deal. Well, again, that's Return to Work Safely Task Force, and you will find the Return to Work Safely Pledge. It is built around the 15 steps that are recommended by the CDC for safe returning to work, and we hope that you'll all check that out. For those that are interested, we have programs that are set up around the 4 pillars of the task force: financial, strategic, people, and medical. So you'll see over the next 12 weeks that the subsequent webinars will be including speakers on all 4 of those topics. Next week's speaker is a local person, Jessica Pierce from State Chemical, and we are very excited to have her technical expertise on what works and what doesn't to kill the virus on surfaces in our workplaces. So she promises she will be her effervescent self, and I hope that all of you will join us. These webcasts will be available on our landing page. So we have taped this and we will be sharing this in a couple of days. So with that, I will thank you, Marcus and team. Rachel, we appreciate all of your efforts to be the inaugural webinar for the Return to Work Safely Task Force. Wishing all of you a good day and good health.